Great. So we can hop right in. I think the next slide touches on a little bit more about the initiative as a whole.
Sorry, the slide is freezing. I'm trying to get it to advance.
That's okay. I can go ahead and start talking while it gets there.
Awesome. There we go.
Okay, great. As you all may be familiar with, and we've given this spiel in other versions of this webinar, so we're happy to do it again for anyone who this may be new information to. But briefly, NCCARE 360 started this initiative, the rollout started in late 2018. And really with the partners along the bottom, in addition to the Unitas community engagement team, we went essentially county by county and brought this coordinated care network to each and every county in North Carolina, really with the ultimate goal of onboarding all 100 counties to this network in some form or fashion by the end of 2020. But we met that goal early. In May, really after COVID had hit, we decided to speed up that timeline in order to have all 100 counties represented earlier and enable each of those counties to more efficiently connect the people that they're serving to direct services. So we were bringing on health, human, social service organizations, churches, local food pantries, really any organization that provided a critical need in their community and served their community, we wanted to bring on. And so as you can see here, really the ultimate goal is to connect providers that are already doing this work in some capacity together onto one common technology, right? They're using one tool together to track outcomes, to collect data, to really show the impact that they're having in their local community. And really with the ultimate goal of closing that feedback loop, right? Knowing that someone was connected to services, which traditional resource directories often aren't able to provide. So as you see here along the bottom, the partners in this initiative, each and every partner played a critical role in making sure that we were able to roll out this initiative. So the first being the Foundation for Health Leadership and Innovation, in partnership with the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services, really made up this public-private partnership in which organizations were able to onboard at no cost because of the private fiduciary agent role that FHLI played, and then the NCDHHS really playing this role of just a fantastic convener, a fantastic partner in order to get messaging out to our local health departments, to DSS, Invoke Rehab, Division of Services for the Blind, among others, to make sure that we were bringing on our needed CBOs and organizations onto this platform. So really a critical piece there. And then moving on to United Way of North Carolina, NC211, just fantastic partners from the get-go, providing the Unitas team with community resources across the state to really help us go out and do our work. Being critical partners in the socialization at the beginning, right? They would stand up with us in a room when we were getting together in person and really just use their connections, the United Way specifically using their connections in the communities to bring on more partners, and just really the NC211 team as well couldn't have done it. And as we'll hear from Amanda later, couldn't have done it without them, and just played such a critical role in this work. So really grateful for them. And then that middle partner, Expound, really played a role in aggregating a lot of existing resource databases that are out there. And now they've come into one powerful public-facing resource repository that lives on NCCARE 360 on our website. So, and then the last piece, Unitas. I mentioned before the community engagement managers like myself that are from North Carolina, live in North Carolina, and we're going county by county. And even after now being fully launched, continue to go county by county and making sure that we're building the number of organizations that are using our platform, and really just building this network and making it truly healthy and something that is sustainable and does live beyond its initial inception. So just really grateful for all of the work that all of these partners have done. So I think we can go to the next slide. And I really wanted to, and sorry, the animation's a little messed up here. I think that's my fault. But I really wanted to touch on the what the general workflow looks like in the platform and with the entire network, so you have an idea of how an individual is connected to services. So as you can see in this example, a client is working with a care manager. It could be their discharge planner, it could be their social worker that they're working with, or just any provider that happens to be a part of the network. So that provider identifies a need outside of which she can provide. So rather than referring someone with a outdated resource guide, which I used to personally make, and I know the struggle of keeping those up to date, or referring them with a number, they're able to take that individual, if the individual does consent, and that's what that blue lock is for, and refer them through the Unitas platform, through the NCCARE 360 network, to a provider that can meet their need. And so that's really the ultimate goal here, is that food assistance provider is able to accept or reject that referral, but that care manager is able to see the outcome. She's able to see that the food provider can help, or if she couldn't, the referral would go back to her. But to have visibility throughout the entire client journey is something that's really powerful. So the referral makes its way to the food assistance provider. Additional needs are identified. Maybe while talking to the food assistance provider, they say, so I'm needing help with food. My refrigerator's broke. I need some help with maybe utility assistance as well. So really what we're doing here in this network model is recognizing that the majority of someone's health is really outside of the clinical setting. So how can we address those multiple needs through a network with all of the providers using one tool? So that's really the ultimate goal here. So the food assistance provider identifies additional needs, perhaps it's an employment provider. So you can really see that this is meant to be an iterative process to really connect the individual to all of the needs that they have, so that we're addressing those more downstream issues before they become more serious. But I think the neat thing here is that not only does the employment provider have visibility backwards, right, to see where this client came from, the experiences that they had, but also that care manager is able to check in on that client and see forwards, the services that they've received, that they were able to be connected. And so that's the really beautiful piece. And now when we're thinking about getting into the food insecurity piece of our presentation, we've seen, especially as a result of COVID, that the need for food assistance, at least the data that we've seen on the platform, that has tremendously increased as we continue to deal and recover from COVID. And so our team is really focused on continuing to onboard providers around that specific area, going back into the counties and saying, okay, we reached out to this local food pantry or food bank or church that provided these services. Let's get more on, and just really trying to beef up that network so that we're not putting too much pressure on the providers that we have on the platform, right? We don't want to overload them. Instead, let's get more on to really fulfill a diverse range of needs. So just super important. We often find, and we use the example frequently of school social workers that we have on our platform that will often tell us that, sorry, my cat is being annoying. But we often have school social workers that will tell us that, when we think about the issues that are facing children in school, they might not be able to concentrate. And when they have more conversations with them or they're acting out in class, they come to find out they're not able to concentrate because they're hungry. They don't have any food at home. And so really what we're trying to do is address these, like I said before, these downstream issues before it becomes more of an issue for the child or for the individual that is food insecure. So that's my brief spiel before I hand it over. But that's a little bit about NCCARE 360, and you'll hear more as we get to the housing component as well. So in this slide, you can see that in Eastern North Carolina, I would say that we have quite a few providers that are more locally based. Often we see food pantries operating out of churches or larger initiatives that are maybe based in one county and serve multiple counties. But we continue to want more on. I think in Eastern North Carolina, just being predominantly rural, there aren't a lot there. However, we want to provide visibility to the ones that are, so that we're able to highlight the need for, and this is something that overall DHHS is interested in, is how can we continue to highlight the fact that there may not be transportation providers, or maybe that we need more food assistance providers in the area, so that we can sort of draw funding that way, or draw attention that way. And that's something that we've really focused on. But luckily with FNEP and other cooperative extension agencies, we're continuing to make an impact there. And so we continue to, our community engagement managers serve on a wide variety of collaboratives, and specifically those I can think in Nash County, Nash and Edgecombe County. There's a collaborative there focusing on food access and food assistance that we've served on previously. So a lot of great work is being done in this area, and we continue to want to highlight and bring more providers on.
Wonderful. Thank you, Megan. Now we're going to transition into Carlton to give us a little bit of deeper insight into food insecurity and what's being done here in the East.
Thank you. This is Carlton Gay. I'm Executive Director here for EXCEED Incorporated, which is the acronym for the Executive Center for Educational and Education Development, Economic and Education Development Incorporated. As you can see, it's a mouthful. Thank you for being on today. What we want to talk about today is food insecurity. We're one of the providers of emergency food as well as food to the food deserts here in Pitt County. As a definition, a little bit about EXCEED, a little bit more about EXCEED. We were actually organized in 2001. We were established in 1995, but we were organized in 2001 as a 501c3 to provide technical support as well as consultations to newly formed organizations and educational and economic development to economic distressed communities. Next slide. We we can do the next slide now. Food insecurity. We got involved with food insecurity back in 2014 with dealing with food, really providing food to the community in 2014 with the Farmers Market Promotion Grant through USDA. And we learned about food insecurity by working with the food deserts here in Pitt County, which we had 3 at the time. Another one has come on board since then. Food insecurity is the inability to provide enough food for every person in the household to live an active and healthy life. It can be experienced consistently or sporadically based due to economic changes in the family household. You also have people living in food deserts where they have limited access to healthy foods at all times. So then we find food insecurity always in the food deserts. So next slide, please. As we move forward. Data shows us that in the U.S., there are 11.5% food insecure individuals, which is about 37 million food insecure people in the country. North Carolina comes down to about 14%, or about 1.4 million people here in North Carolina that are food insecure. And here in Eastern North Carolina, because we're losing our neighborhood grocery stores or community grocery stores at such an alarming rate, food insecurity here in Eastern North Carolina is concentrated and is very high. Here in Pitt County, we're at 16%. To the south of this, in Greene County, we're at 18%. And if you look going west, Edgecombe County is about 19%. So you can see how food insecurity is impacting us here in Eastern North Carolina at a rate that's a little bit higher than around other areas. And that, let's say again, that's mainly due to not having access, or the communities not having access to healthy food and grocery stores in their communities. Let's see the next slide. Next slide, please. So as we approach this issue in the communities, like I said, we were working with the food deserts. We were able to bring in our neighborhood markets, as well as an Access Connect market, which was a mobile farmers market. And as we were taking off, a couple of things happened. We had two hurricanes, Matthew and Florence, two years apart, that helped to push us back into insecure situations. But we learned something in the process. As we talked to the neighborhood and the community that we were serving, we learned what they really wanted and what they really needed. So an advice to those of you that's providing food to the communities, especially economic distress communities, food deserts, talk to the citizens in the community. They'll help you a whole lot with how you'll be able to carry out your mission to provide that food. We had to go in and we had to assess the community to see if there were adequate food in the community. Was it a food desert that we're working with? Do they have the grocery store? Is it there? Is it within reach? Because transportation become an issue when you have a store that's 10 blocks from the community. That's a long ways to go. Even if they have public transportation, they can't just pick up 2 or 3 bags of groceries and get on the bus all the time. So transportation become another issue. And then we have to look at also what is the income rate in the community? Are there other sources that can provide food to communities? So these things we learned as we kind of went along. If you go to the next slide, I'll show you about some of the impact as well as some of the things that we were doing to try to address the situation. We formed collaborations and partnerships with key agencies in the community. Vital Foundation is very key. Conservation Fund, Resource Communities, they also came in to help us purchase infrastructure to transport food to these food deserts. RAFI has another program that actually gives us incentives that we can work with our SNAP participants to help address their food insecurity. As a matter of fact, we're able to help them to increase their buying power with their SNAP benefits because we can use double bucks, what is called fresh bucks. We can actually offer them, and it's a double. If they spend a certain amount of money, with $20 on their SNAP card, we can match it dollar for dollar, $20, so they can double their purchasing power with that. And another initiative we undertook at the same time was the CSA, the Community Support of Agriculture. Normally, CSAs or the traditional CSA, you would prepay, an individual family would prepay for their food, and then they would get it delivered on a timely schedule, either weekly or monthly. Working in the communities that we work in, we found out working with SNAP participants, they could actually tell us that they needed a certain amount or they wanted a certain amount of food at a certain date, and we could bring it. That way, the CSA become more effective in those communities by not necessarily just prepaying for the food up front and then deliver it to them. As we talk week to week, we're able to match what they need to what they could afford. And so the CSA took off really well in those communities, and is really doing well now. We work with ministers also, and there are other local farmers that were able to help us source the CSA boxes, the farmers markets, that also to bring the two together. These are things that that's kind of helping us to impact the issues that's going on in the communities, to bring up just some of the things that they need, rather than them continue in the same position, because it's definitely not in anyone's interest to be a food desert, as we noticed in 2014, and then come back in 2019, 2020, and this community is still a food desert. We're missing something there. We need to be able to try to bring the community up economically while we're providing them the services. So it's different things going on at the same time. That's all I can say about that right now. Next slide, if you would, because we one other phenomenon that's going on right now is the impact that we're getting from COVID-19. If you do the next slide, please, and then we'll talk about that. So with the impact with the COVID, we're actually providing more emergency food right now in food boxes, especially to seniors. And we're bringing this to another partnership, relationship that we have with the Council on Aging out of Beaufort County rather, and we're able to give them to bring food boxes to the seniors. But as a solution overall, when you're looking at food insecurity in the communities that we're serving, increasing food distribution is one way to help the community. Strengthen that distribution infrastructure through collaborations and partnerships. And if we can get the infrastructure, then you can bring the food to the community and we can help people in their situations. Raise awareness to to see just who's in trouble, who needs the services, and try to bring them in that way. And one key element that I can't resist mentioning, NCCARE 360. When we became, when we enrolled in NCCARE 360, we are really able now and then partner with Grow out of Vance County, becoming community health workers. We're not able not only to deal with the food insecurity, but there's other issues that's going on in the household now that we can reach through NCCARE 360, which is a great tool. I want to thank you guys for bringing that on board, and being a part of it is really helping our agency, our organization to reach more deeper into our community and the broader community through this resource. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that overview and the work that you're doing out in the community. I really appreciate it. Just to let all of our participants know, these slides have been made available on the same webpage that you used to register for the event. So you will have these handouts with this connection information in case you want to reach out to Carlton after today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
He'll also remain on the line to answer questions at the end, but we'll go right now into housing. Take it away, Megan.
Thank you. So housing, what an interesting journey this has been for NCCARE 360 in our housing landscape. So at the beginning of our inception, we made what I would say was, and I think our whole team would say, was a mistake. We didn't acknowledge, or actually probably weren't aware of, it was just our ignorance of the complexities of our housing landscape in North Carolina as a whole. Working with continuums of care, working with coordinated entry, working with our housing system that's been established for so long. And so recognizing that, we took a step back, did some listening sessions, really investigated the housing providers and made sure that we were not risking their funding, because a lot of these housing providers, especially those that serve those experiencing homelessness, were required to use HMIS, are required to use HMIS. And so we didn't want NCCARE 360 and Unitas coming in and obviously replacing that mandate. And so we really thought critically about how we can continue to onboard providers that provide these needs. And a lot of times we'll see providers that, not just a homeless shelter, but a provider that not only provides housing, or maybe it's utility assistance, which in our taxonomy falls under the housing umbrella, but maybe provides other needs outside of strictly housing and shelter that we can onboard. And so we started to think a little creatively about that. But I would say this has been, one of the areas, like transportation, which was, but transportation is a little bit different in that transportation providers were hard to find because there just weren't a lot of them. Whereas housing providers, we could find them, but it was just a matter of assuring them that we weren't jeopardizing funding, or we wanted them to come on in a different way. We wanted them to onboard in a sort of non-traditional manner. So it was just a lot of conversations, but I really feel like we've made a lot of progress in the past 2 years with these providers, and thinking outside of the box about how we can connect them, whether it means that the organization comes on and isn't set up to receive referrals, but instead is just sending referrals for other needs identified outside of housing. And so we've been onboarding them that way for some time. But For NCCARE 360, specifically the Back at Home initiative, which Amanda could touch on as well, I worked with this initiative. We were working on this since about, at least from the Unitas point of view, since about June. And this was something that just recently launched previously at the beginning of October, I believe. And this was something that was hugely important, this huge project. Unitas working very closely with the Coalition to End Homelessness in North Carolina, working super closely with NC 211, Amanda, Heather Black, their team, just to make sure that we were onboarding rehousing agencies in the appropriate way so that we're respecting and adhering to the existing coordinated entry path, how individuals are connected to those rehousing agencies through 211 in this example, but that also those agencies are still able to enter their mandated information into HMIS or that mandated system that they're using. So just a very complex project, getting on, I think at this point, 25 rehousing agencies, I want to say thereabouts, and then their staff, and then going over workflows. Just the 211 team and NCCEH just did a fantastic job of rolling this out and making sure that these providers understood the workflow, how this would work for them, so that we can ultimately help more people. I think that was that is our ultimate goal. So I'll leave it there. I want to give Amanda enough time to speak to her example, but just a fantastic partnership between so many people, but just a really pressing need that we're seeing increase even more in North Carolina. So the fact that this partnership is now between general housing providers and NCCARE 360 is now being fleshed out and being more understood is just a success all around. So Amanda, I will hand it to you.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Megan. I do not have any slides to share because I'm sharing a whole bunch of different things, so I didn't think that slides made sense. The first thing I want to share was a little bit more about NC 211. We are available 24/7, 365 in any language. And so back in March 17th, I think it was, we got activated by the governor to be the go-to phone number for anything related to COVID and community resources. So I just did a check to make sure that it was the same in the eastern part of the state, and sure enough it is. Since March, the number one need has been help with rent. The number two need has been help with food. So that could either include knowing about food pantries, which ones are open, how they've changed their policies because of COVID. And the number three need is the general information about COVID. So even though all of our calls are related to COVID, I just wanted to highlight that what we're talking about today is so important because the number one need has been rent, and then food, and then number three is what is COVID? What's a face mask? All those things that happened back in what seems like a distant memory now. I'm mainly also going to give a case example, but before I do that, I want to share two other things. If you haven't heard about the HOPE program, I want to share about that. It is currently available to renters that are either past due on rent and or utilities. So they have to be a renter to receive assistance. They can apply online, nc211.org/hope, or they can call 211 and do the application over the phone. If they're doing the application over the phone, it takes about 20 minutes. So 211 itself has had an incredibly high call volume these past 3 weeks. Excuse me, because HOPE just started on October 15th. So if you hear of anyone that's having difficulty getting through to 211, that is why, but please ask them to keep on calling. So now to switch gears about the case example and also to share a little bit more about our 360 navigators. So we have 4 360 navigators that assist clients through the NCCARE 360 platform. So anytime you have somebody that you're entering into NCCARE 360 and you're not sure where to send them to get their need met, send it to our navigators. So our navigators will, of course, contact them to make sure that the need they're sent for is the most pressing need, and then also to see what other needs they have. In addition, we follow up with the client. We follow up with the client either until their need is met or the client says, I got this, I'm just waiting to hear back from the agencies. So super important to remember the 360 navigators and to use us when you're in the platform and you're like, I don't know where to send them, just send them to us. In addition, if somebody goes on to NCCARE360.org and clicks on request assistance up at the top, when they do an email that way, that comes directly to our navigators. So those are the super important things I want to share before I share the actual case example. So super high call volume because of COVID. Number one needs rent, food, and then COVID. And then in addition, the HOPE program, NC211.org/HOPE, or they can call 211 to apply. That's for any renter that is behind on rent or utilities because of COVID. Of course, that's the economic crisis of COVID and not that they had to actually have COVID. And then to refer to our navigators, you can do it in the NCCARE 360 system, or you can have somebody go to NCCARE360.org and request assistance. Okay, so now for my actual case example. So this one we received from the website. So it was somebody that logged in and then said that they needed assistance. And this woman only shared that she was currently homeless. So our navigator called to get some more information. It turned out that she was pregnant with 3 kids, and she's homeless because she could no longer afford her motel room. So she doesn't have a place to stay right now. So our navigator spoke with her and figured where exactly she could receive assistance. The most pressing need, of course, was to find her and her children shelter. So our navigator was able to find an emergency transitional housing program that was able to take her in that night. However, she couldn't go directly to the emergency transitional housing program because COVID. So she had to quarantine first, but thankfully the transitional housing was able to pay for the motel. So she was able to quarantine till she got her COVID results back. She didn't have COVID. So then she was able to enter the program. But in the meantime, our navigator said, how's everything else going with your family? And so it turned out that she was also food insecure. So she didn't know where her next meal was going to be coming from. And she needed diapers. And because everything was going on and she had so many transitions going on, she didn't have prenatal care. So mind you, this started with just housing, but by our navigators talking to this woman, 3 other very important needs were identified. So thankfully, her food for the time being was then secured once she got into the motel because the transitional housing also assisted with the cost of the food. We also, though, ensured that she was signed up for WIC and also signed up for SNAP. Then, in addition, she was finally able to move into the transitional housing program. We, again, set her up with prenatal care, too, so that she was receiving that. But since she was still in basically a temporary situation, our navigator kept on following up. So the navigator was able to help her with resources to find an affordable rental. So this one ends up being an incredible success because she was able to move from the transitional housing into a affordable rental for her and her children. And then in addition, the other needs were met. So that is why it's so important for us to be talking to these clients and to be digging deeper to see their additional needs. That is the end of my case example.
Wonderful. Thank you, Amanda, so much for being a part. We have 2 questions already in the chat, so we'll start with these. But for all of our attendees, if you have any questions, please be sure to add them to the Q&A box, and we will go right down in order to have these questions answered and expounded upon. So the first question is, are there any suggestions for water bills? This one may be for Amanda.
So if they're a renter, I would definitely encourage them to apply for the HOPE program. Also, if you go into 360, there will be many traditional referrals that are not the HOPE program that can help with a water bill. So of course, I'm thinking everyone knows about the CDC declaration form. So this is a form that a renter can fill out if they are past due on their rent. So they need to Google CDC form, read it over, print it, and give it to their landlord. And it's basically acknowledging that they have past due rent, but they can't pay it right now because times are tough because of the economic crisis that's come because of COVID. So once they give that to their landlord, they can't be evicted. So super important document to remember if you're talking to anyone that is a renter that is past due, the CDC declaration form. Honestly, the easiest way to find it is just Googling CDC form, and it will take you right to where it is on cdc.gov. I bring that up because on the flip side, there isn't a similar document for the utility company. So it is looking to see if there is a resource that can help with getting them caught up if they're past due, or trying to advocate with them and the water company to try to get a payment arrangement made just so that their water doesn't get disconnected.
Wonderful, thank you. The next question is, do you have to have citizenship to receive services? And I think this can be across the board. I think it'd be good to hear from both Carlton and Amanda for the services that are being discussed here in the platform today.
Okay, this is Carlton. So we are, as through GROW, the program that we're community health. We're also community health workers. We've enrolled our whole team here at Exceed into this program. So we're getting referrals that come to us through Unite Us. We are referring right many here in Eastern North Carolina to the 211 program. I think it's 2 agencies here. The church over in Aden, I forget the name, but we're here. And to the question about the citizenship, we have at least one Hispanic CHW. Some people, like you say, do not want to be brought into NCCARE 360 for various reasons, and that's one of the reasons. But we are still taking their information and referring them back to GROW, and there's an in-house way that they're looking at helping these individuals. That's about much I can say right now. But if you contact us here at Exceed, we can take that person as a CHW and refer them to our in-house source and go from there.
Wonderful, thank you. How about Amanda, your piece? Do you have to have citizenship?
Yeah, so similar to Carlton, it kind of varies on what the need is and where they're going. I can definitely say within the NCCARE 360 platform, you can see if they require citizenship by seeing what kind of documents they require. So it won't specifically say if they need to be a citizen, but by seeing what kind of documents they need to bring, we'll usually tell you if they need to be a citizen or not. Right. I know that food agencies are fairly flexible if it's just like a one-time need in terms of picking up food. Would you agree with that, Carlton? Yeah.
Yes, I would. Yeah.
Yeah. And then so regardless of if they're using 360 or calling 211, we'd be able to tell them what kind of documents they need to bring to receive that assistance. Exactly. So it just depends on the funding source that the agency is receiving.
Exactly.
Wonderful. Thank you. The next question we have is, how do we contact navigators? This is probably for Amanda, I'm assuming.
Yeah, Megan, do you want to chime in? You haven't answered a question yet, so I can totally answer this, but Megan, you're welcome to if you'd like to.
I think you got it. I feel like you're the expert there.
Fair enough. Okay, so yes, anytime you're searching any kind of subtype, they're called within 360 or any kind of taxonomy, you will see NC211 comes up. So you just refer to NC211. So basically you pick what the client's need is, and then for the agency, you pick NC211, and that's how it gets to our navigators. If the person's not in 360, then that's when you do the route of telling them to go to NCCARE360.org and then request assistance, and that will also go to a navigator. So there's two different ways to get in touch with a navigator.
Wonderful, thank you. Before we go to the next question, I just want to be sure Carlton read the chat. People are singing your praises about the work that's being done in Pitt County. So thank you so much for serving Eastern North Carolina. We really, really appreciate it. The next question in our Q&A box, if a family shows the CDC rental form to their landlord, are they still responsible for their rent once they find employment, or how long do they not have to pay their rent? Does the form specify how long they do not have to pay rent?
Yep, totally. So it keeps them safe until the end of the year, which is a shock to me that we're almost done with 2020. So it makes it so they don't have to pay rent for the rest of the year if their economic situation is such that they still can't pay it. And so it's saying as of January 1st is when they would either be repaying or the landlord can file for eviction. Last week, Governor Roy Cooper did an executive order that was saying, hey, North Carolina, this does apply to us. Landlords, you have to accept this. Judges, you have to accept this. So this is, of course, a government form that's being used nationwide, but there's some shady landlords out there. So there was some that were not accepting it. And so that's why Governor Cooper made his executive order. So as of, I think it was Friday at 5, the landlord has to accept it. And if you're still talking to a shady landlord that won't accept it and they do get a court date, they just bring it with them. But the important thing to remember is they have to sign it and give it to their landlord, because until they sign it and give it to the landlord, they can be evicted. So it's just like an extra step that needs to be done. So to answer your question, it keeps them safe until January 1st. January 1st is when they either have to come up with a payment plan with their landlord or pay the entire past due amount.
Thank you so much. Are there any questions for any remaining questions for our panelists? We have answered all that's in the Q&A box, but want to give the opportunity in the moments that we have remaining, just in case we have some lingering questions that need to be answered. Yes, to answer the question that was just placed in the chat box, you have access to all of these slides. They have been posted in your My AHEC account. So associated with this registration for today, you'll log into My AHEC the same way that you did to register for this course, and you will have access to these handouts. They are there for your use. Oh, we have another question in the Q&A box. When we talk about not paying until the end of the year, does that mean they will still be responsible for the months that they've missed and must catch up on them?
Yes, exactly. So the form is basically acknowledging, I know I have this past due amount, I just can't pay it right now. And because of COVID, it doesn't make sense for people to be evicted, because then they'd be in the homeless shelters and that would be spreading COVID more. So that's why the CDC is involved. So the CDC is basically saying, in order to stop the spread of COVID, people should stay where they are instead of doubling up with families or going to homeless shelters. So yes, they will still have to pay that amount.
Great question. We have another that's just popped in. Will there be assistance to help them pay that back rent? Most of them most likely won't have it up front. I know you mentioned payment plans, but are there any other initiatives out there?
Yes, if you are talking to anyone that has past due amounts that began April 1st, definitely tell them about the HOPE program. And there's been a whole lot of applicants, so definitely tell them to apply sooner rather than later. And then so nc211.org/HOPE, or just calling 211. And so that would hypothetically help them with up to 6 months of rent. So hopefully that would get them caught up. Then, of course, there's other agencies out there that receive CARES funding. And depending on the county or the city, there's also funding available through them that can help with the economic crisis because of COVID. So yes, there's definitely help from the community agencies to get them caught up on that rent.
Great. Thank you, Amanda. Final call. Do we have any extra questions for our great presenters today? in the meantime, I'll give our kind of closing remarks just in case one pops in as it's being typed. You guys will receive an evaluation as attendees within the next 5 business days. Please answer them openly and honestly. Eastern AHEC really does use that to help shape and formulate programs going forward. We'd love to have your feedback. If you enjoyed this series and would like to learn more, please let us know so that we can include sessions in future programming that address the topics that we've discussed in this 3-part series. I'm seeing a question in the chat. I'm sorry, I just want to be sure we answer it. Trying to download the handouts, but getting a patient registration form instead, a partner registration. So the partner registration form is one of the handouts. We did post these slides, but there may be a delay. We will check on that in Docebo, which is our learning management system. We have been having a few issues with handout uploads in LearnerView. So please let us look into that. Thank you so much for bringing it to our attention that the handouts may not be there. We really appreciate it. So thank you. But yes, as one of the handouts, you will see the partner registration form for NCCARE 360 if you'd like to become a partner. But I'm not seeing any more questions in the Q&A box. We thank our panelists for your expertise and your time. It was wonderful to hear from our partners that are doing such great work across the state. I hope you all stay well in this chaotic season and year, and especially this week. Stay well, stay happy, stay healthy. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Mary.